This video is brought to you by Nvidia, market leaders in cutting-edge GPU hardware that delivers unparalleled performance in new and upcoming games like PAX Day, Alan Wake 2 Night Springs, or Black Myth Wukong. Stick around to the end of the video to learn more about how Nvidia's hardware and technology will transform the way you play. Game... Sorry for the cough. Your boy brought back something special from LA. Coronavirus. To be honest, it's unsurprising since I typically go like 51 weeks of the year seeing the same 5 people, and then all of a sudden I'm in LA meeting like a bazillion game developers and publishers and YouTubers and whatever. Plus, you should have seen how tight they packed us into that Ubisoft theater, man. We're basically sitting on each other's laps. So yeah, I'm feeling pretty rubbish right now, so please bear with me for this episode. Luckily, I'll be right as rain for this Sunday, which is an important date because that is a day that I'm going to be co-hosting a 12-hour charity fundraising live stream for Game on Cancer, a fantastic organization that directly funds vital cancer research. I'm doing that in conjunction with Back Pocket, a local Aussie crew who are some of my favorite people, very good for a laugh. And we have special guests, including Clive Rosfield himself, aka Ben Starr, Jennifer English, aka the voice of Shadowheart in Baldur's Gate 3, Alana Pierce, longtime friend of the channel, Greg Miller and Paris Lilly from Kinda Funny, and plenty more. We're even doing a live Q&A session for the Friends Per Second podcast, since Jake and Lucy will be dialing in as well. We're giving away prizes big and small, including a custom-built PC, courtesy of Nvidia and Gigabyte. It's absolutely huge. It's Sunday, 9 AM Australian Eastern Standard Time. It'll be live on my YouTube channel. I've actually scheduled a live event already, so you can click the link in the description below, and that'll give you a notification when that goes live. It's also going to be on Game on Cancer's Twitch channel, so please do stop by, hang out, give generously, and hopefully have a great time. Alright, it's been a hot minute since we've had a regular news show, what with Summer Games Fest gumming up the works. Speaking of which, we thought the not E3 season was done and dusted, but just when we thought we were out, Nintendo pulls us back in. In what was likely to be the last major showcase from Nintendo that doesn't feature the Switch 2, Nintendo did a pretty solid job of proving that the Switch 1 ain't ready to hang up its gloves just yet. The showcase began with a reveal for Mario and Luigi Brothership, the first new entry in the Mario and Luigi lineup in nearly a decade. This one makes the triple jump to 3D, but still retains the very striking 2D aesthetic for which the series is known. Plenty of cool co-op mechanics in both exploration and combat, plenty of charm in the writing and presentation, plenty of that Nintendo magic that they relentlessly pour into anything starring their leading man and his brother. The only downside? Brothership is not a word, but then again, if they called it Mario and Luigi Brotherhood, it would sound like some sort of Assassin's Creed crossover, so I think they made the right call. This one will help pad out Nintendo's holiday lineup, arriving November 7th. One of the bigger announcements you may have missed is the arrival of Fantasian Neo Dimension on console hardware. So this is from Hironobu Sakaguchi, creator of the Final Fantasy series, and Nobuo Uematsu, one of the most prolific JRPG composers of all time. This is a classically inspired JRPG with plenty of modern twists, like the ability to teleport trash mobs to another dimension so you can then fight them all at once later on. That is sick. This used to be an Apple Arcade exclusive, where it was basically the best thing on Apple Arcade, scooping up awards and acclaim. Finally, years later, the game will arrive on all platforms, including Switch in the holiday season. Definitely have this one on your radar. The Dragon Quest III HD 2D remake kind of took me by surprise. I'm not really close to this series, but when I saw this, I was like, damn, they have done a terrific job making this look both classic and contemporary. Dragon Quest III is the big one in Japan. This is where the series really found its identity and stride, so a lot of excitement for this one. Incidentally, series creator Yuji Horii stopped by to say hi and reveal that they're also working on a Dragon Quest 1 and 2 remake, something earlier leaked but not confirmed. Those will be out sometime in 2025, but Dragon Quest 3 will arrive on November 14th. Donkey Kong Country HD Returns is a remaster of the Wii game. This is actually being developed by Retro Studios themselves and will arrive on January 16th next year. We've got our first proper look at Funko Fusion gameplay, and it does not look good. I'm unsure if this is because of the limitations of the Switch hardware or if the game just looks like this on all platforms, but this looks very rough. It's from a bunch of developers who formerly worked on Lego games, so hopefully it's fun. We'll find out when it arrives on September 13th. Okay, so for this next one, we're gonna need the song. So, roll it, Stu.
I wanna take you for a ride. I wanna take you for a ride.
That is right, ladies and gentlemen. The Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting Collection is basically the single greatest collection of fighting games ever assembled into a single package. We're talking 7 games, including X-Men Children of the Atom, X-Men vs. Street Fighter, Marvel vs. Capcom 1 and 2, The Punisher, Marvel Superheroes vs. Street Fighter, and Marvel Superheroes. Best of all, they knew not to include Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. Appreciate that. Thank you very much. But that's not all. It features a museum and art gallery. It supports online play for all games, including PvE co-op for the Punisher. It features rollback netcode, and it even has a jukebox, so you can play the Marvel vs. Capcom 2 character select music on repeat until the heat death of the universe. A truly incredible package, which you can grab sometime later this year on Switch, PC, and PlayStation, but not on Xbox. That is pretty brutal. Hopefully Capcom revisit that decision and get it out on Xbox at some point in the future. Super Mario Party Jamboree is the latest in the very, very long-running series. It takes place on an idyllic island resort where the only thing that ever goes wrong is you losing every round you play against your friends. It has 110 minigames. I ran the numbers on that and I can confirm that that is a lot. It supports up to 20 players online, which is going to get pretty nuts. It's coming pretty soon too, actually. It'll arrive on October 17th. All right, we're getting to the business end now. 2 big reveals to go. The first was a new Zelda title, but for the very first time, we won't be playing as Zelda. Instead, we'll be playing as the princess, whose name escapes me, but whatever, it's cool. Take a look.
By waving the tri-rod at a table she found, Zelda learned how to create an imitation of it, called an echo. Once you learn an echo of something, you can recreate it whenever you'd like. Even if there's a wall blocking your path, you can create echoes of tables to get a leg up. Just like that.
This is The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, introduced by Aonuma himself. This absolutely exudes the playful, experimental energy that made Tears of the Kingdom so incredible. Forget slashing stuff with a sword. Here, Zelda will be able to conjure up imitations of items she's discovered throughout the world, using them to aid in traversal, puzzle solving, and combat. You can even copy enemies you fought so you can then recreate them as summonable minions. This is just really, really cool. Just not what you'd expect from this franchise. It's so inventive, which I guess kind of is Nintendo's whole MO, so I suppose we shouldn't be too surprised. But it does look absolutely brilliant, especially with this top-down 3D perspective and this art style. Very high on my wish list now, and thankfully it's a very reasonable wait. It'll arrive on September 26th. And that brings us to... I don't even think I can say it aloud. I am still recovering from the reveal. Just roll it, Stu. Metroid Prime 4 feels like an impossible fever dream, a sequel to a series that had its heyday 4 console generations ago and then lay dormant until a brilliant remaster of the first entry arrived last year. Metroid Prime 4 should have been in our hands a long, long time ago. That game was, after all, initially revealed back in 2017. Back then, it was in development at a Bandai Namco studio, but evidently Nintendo were not happy with the progress, so they took the game off Bandai and gave it back to the series creators, Retro Studios. That was back in 2019, and for nearly 5 years now, we've heard nothing at all until yesterday when the trailer dropped out of nowhere and blew the doors off the joint. A perfect way to cap off the non-E3 season. As for the game itself, it definitely looks like Metroid Prime. The trailer gave away very little except for some setting, story, and character stuff. Mechanics-wise, Nintendo are still keeping their cards close to their chest. Interestingly, this one is not arriving this year. It's a 2025 drop, which has led many to speculate that it may be a cross-gen title, launching on both the Switch and its successor. Not gonna lie, having Metroid Prime 4 running at a silky smooth 60 FPS would be a pretty nice addition to the Switch 2's launch library, so I can definitely see this happening. This is all just speculation, of course, so we'll find out together when Nintendo does start talking about the Switch 2, which hopefully isn't too far off. Outside of all these bigger announcements was smaller stuff like great additions to Nintendo Switch Online, including Perfect Dark with online multiplayer, plenty more ports of first and third party titles, and even a hardware announcement, a special limited edition version of the Switch Lite to go with that new Zelda game. This was a pretty decent showcase, especially for a system that is well beyond its expected shelf life. For a while now, the Nintendo Switch has felt like it's always at death's door before getting up, beating its chest and exclaiming, "I got one more in me!" Truly the little handheld that could. Much respect to Nintendo for the turnaround they achieved this generation. Right, so what else went down this week? Well, there wasn't a whole lot of good news, to be honest, and news doesn't get much worse than layoffs and studio closures, and there were a lot of those this past 2 weeks. Remember Wizard with a Gun? It was a generally well-received co-op survival game published by Devolver Digital of all labels. It seems to have sold relatively well, 82% positive on Steam, all things pointing in the right direction, it seemed. Not so much though, because this week the studio behind it, Galvanic Games, announced that they were closing up shop. They attributed the closure to low sales. They offered nothing but praise for their publisher, Devolver Digital, saying, quote, "Working with Devolver Digital was a dream come true for us. Together we created a game I'm incredibly proud of. There is a certain bittersweetness to knowing that we accomplished all things we set out to do when we founded Galvanic in 2015, end quote. A similar fate has befallen Pieces Interactive, the studio behind the recent Alone in the Dark remake. The reviews for this one were okay, but it was pretty clear that sales were not. The game has just over 1,000 reviews on Steam, and given the production values and voice talent in the mix, I'm going to guess that this one did not make its budget back. As a result, industry villain extraordinaire Embracer Group shuttered the studio, offering no official statement on the matter. It does feel like a short-sighted move, given that Alone in the Dark was a more than competent game, and that studio could have been put to work elsewhere. Now, sadly, they'll never get the chance. Seems to be a very different story for another studio that was shuttered this week. So, do you guys remember Life by You? It was the Sim-style game that was announced last year, promising an early access release pretty soonish, and then that release got delayed, and then it got delayed again, and then it got delayed again. That isn't super unusual in the world of video games, but what is unusual is that this game, Life by You, will now never come out because the publisher, Paradox, has cancelled the game. The Paradox deputy CEO put out a statement on the matter saying, quote, "This was an incredibly difficult call to make and is a clear failure on Paradox's part to meet both our own and the community's expectations. A few weeks back, we decided to hold off on an early access release in order to re-evaluate Life by Us, and we still felt the game was lacking in some key areas. Though a time extension was an option, once we took that pause to get a wider view of the game, it became clear to us that the road leading to a release that we felt confident about was far too long and uncertain. However, when we came to a point where we believed that more time will not get us close enough to a version we would be satisfied with, then we believe it is better to stop," end quote. That is pretty crazy to cancel the game 6 feet from the finish line, but to be fair, trying to compete with The Sims is no easy feat, and if you aren't ready for that battle, then it might be better to bow out before that bell even rings. Sadly though, this does mean the closure of the studio, 24 people out of the job. It follows a number of L's for Paradox, who have struggled to gain their footing over the past few years, with City Skylines 2 facing myriad technical issues, Lamplighters League flopping badly, and Prison Architect 2's developer stepping away from the project before it even shipped. Paradox is by far and away the biggest strategy games focused publisher, so ideally they find a way to get back on their feet since many gamers are very interested in the type of game that Paradox tries to put out. You get the feeling that the road to recovery will be a long one. There were more closures and layoffs as well, by the way. Australian-based League of Geeks announced that they were going into hibernation after 13 years in operation. Last year they put out Solium Inferno, which was literally one of the highest rated games of 2024, but sadly it did not sell very well. Sumo Group is a bit of a dog's body operation with a presence in multiple countries. They just announced they were laying off 270 employees, or 15% of their workforce. The cuts are focused in Canada, UK, Poland, Czech Republic, and India. The wave of layoffs also seems to finally be reaching Japanese shores. Final Fantasy Brave Exvius developer Gummy are a mobile games developer, and they're offering voluntary redundancies for their staff. Japanese law makes swift layoffs extremely difficult, so this is likely the studio's best option to effect a reduction in headcount. So all of this is happening because, as we're told every single day by video games executives, times are tough. That is exactly why EA, for example, laid off 5% of their workforce earlier this year. They just couldn't afford to keep paying that many people all that money. So what they're going to do instead is pay all that money to just a few people. Enter EA's annual executive remuneration report, revealing that the top 5 people at EA earned $60 million between them, with $25 million of that going to Andy Wilson and $12 million of that going to Laura Meal, the person who put out the statement about the layoffs earlier this year, being like, "These are such hard times and we're really focused on our people," and blah blah blah. EA's median salary is $148K a year. That means that Andy Wilson took home 168 times more money than your average employee. If you sacked those 5 people and distributed their earnings equally, you could hire or retain over 400 employees at that median salary. And do not come at me with this bullshit about, "Oh, it's stock options, you don't understand economics." I understand it perfectly. I understand that there is a system that normalizes and excuses this sort of wage disparity, and it sucks. I don't think all layoffs are inherently bad. I just think that most of them are. And when you lay off over 600 people in a year, but pay out executive packages that could have kept 400 of those people employed, then I think the system is at least a little bit broken. Anyway, that is the end of the economics lecture. Let's say we get back to talking about some video games. You guys see that Dragon Age Dreadwolf gameplay? No? Let's take a look.
I hope Nev's as good at finding people as you claim.
She's the best damn detective I've ever met. If she says she's got a lead on Solus, I believe her.
should we be in more of a hurry to get out of here?
We don't want to look conspicuous. Just get out of here nice and casual. Find Nevgalis and stop Solus.
So first of all, this isn't even called Dreadwolf anymore, by the way. It's now Veilguard for reasons that BioWare say relate to the story, so fair enough. Though Dreadwolf was a pretty badass name, so it seems like a bit of a shame. As for the game itself, this gameplay has met a pretty mixed reception, unlike the recent cinematic reveal trailer, which absolutely everybody hated. This gameplay trailer has around 3.5 million views on YouTube, 81,000 likes to 150k dislikes. Some people don't like the art design, others don't like the very action-focused combat, which is a far cry from the CRPG roots of Dragon Age Origins. Others worry about how the game approaches dialogue choices and consequences. A lot of complaints across the board, but I do think it's way too early to judge a lot of this stuff. Dialogue, for example. This is a game that lives or dies by the quality of its writing, and just like you can't judge a book after reading its first 3 pages, you can't judge the quality of the writing based purely on the intro sequence. Combat depth is another one. Important to note that this is just a level 1 character with like no abilities. It's obviously going to be deeper than what they're showcasing here, but how much deeper, I don't know. Visually, I kind of find myself liking it for how stylized it is. Don't get me wrong, I would have preferred this to be like a grim, dark, blood-smattered affair in the vein of Origins, but I do like that BioWare are committing to their visual style, and I think that it looks unique. Some people say it looks like Fortnite, but I think that's a little reductive, and the town sequence in particular really stood out to me as being something that we hadn't quite seen before. So look, am I on board with this? No, not yet, but I definitely am keeping an open mind. These sorts of games are big and they offer a lot in terms of characters, storytelling, gameplay, and exploration. I certainly want to experience at least some of that for myself before rushing to any judgments. One game that is well and truly done and dusted at this point is Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. Obviously, we have covered this one extensively, so no need to retread that territory. But while Summer Games Fest was going down, Jason Schreier of Bloomberg released a behind-the-scenes report about what happened and what's likely to happen next. I wish I could tell you that it was full of bombshell reveals, but the truth is, it's very much what you'd expect. Studio leadership was ill-equipped to design a live service game after so long spent designing single-player offerings. Huge sections of the game were designed and built before being tossed away, like a vehicle system that felt entirely superfluous given that the core gameplay loop was entirely built around character traversal. Concerns were raised along the way, but a culture of toxic positivity would see issues unanswered, and Warner Brothers executives had absolutely no capacity whatsoever to judge what they were looking at, believing that they had another billion-dollar franchise on their hands until those negative previews started pouring in. Schreier says that Suicide Squad is now getting bare-bones support, not at all hard to believe given the studio just cancelled its regular community updates and will now only communicate on an as-needs basis. Schreier says they will deliver the promised DLC roadmap, but there's no reason to believe that Rocksteady will stick with this game after that. Interestingly, he says that Rocksteady are now assisting on a Hogwarts Legacy Director's Cut, which is not announced by the way, so that's news. But it's also a huge bummer that a studio as storied as Rocksteady are essentially relegated to support studio status, working to make a director's cut of a game they didn't even release. Schreier says that Rocksteady are in the process of pitching their next game, which will likely be a single-player title. Let's hope they get the chance to make it. A quick lightning round to finish off. Miyazaki has 2 passions in life, it seems. Poison Swamps and talking about how much he'd love to see a Bloodborne remaster without actually making it. Speaking to PC Gamer, he said, quote, "If I say I want one, I'll get in trouble as well. But it's nothing I'm opposed to," end quote. Nice, man. Thanks. Very helpful. Looking forward to the next interview where you say the same thing in 20 years from now. We're still pleading for a Bloodborne remaster. Valve is being sued in the UK for £650 million by a digital rights campaigner. They claim that Valve rigged the market, pushing out potential competitors by demanding price parity clauses, limiting the ability for publishers to make games cheaper on other platforms. They also take exception to the 30% cut that Valve demands, which the suit describes as excessive, and yeah, it most likely is. The suit alleges that 14 million people in the UK have been overcharged for games, and the claimant is seeking compensation for each of them. Best of British luck with this one. And finally, remember that 8K sticker that Sony put on the box of every PS5 when the screen industry was still trying to make 8K a thing? Well, they've given up, and thankfully, so have Sony. They've removed that 8K label from PS5s due to a lack of support. If a lack of support is the metric, then I wonder if they'll take down any mention of the PSVR 2 from their website. We'll have to wait and see. So, other than all the Summer Games Fest stuff, what else got announced or delayed this past 2 weeks? Well, be sure to pay attention to the moves that Apple are making in the core gaming space. After cornering the entire mobile market, Apple now turns its attention to bringing real video games to their Macs and mobile devices. At the recent WWDC event, Apple revealed a slew of games headed to Mac, including Valheim, Frostpunk 2, RoboCop Rogue City, Power World, and tons more, as well as mobile ports of games like Resident Evil 7, Resident Evil 2, and the recently released AC Mirage. Speaking of which, Ubisoft says they're doubling down on their commitment to Apple hardware, and that we should absolutely expect plenty more games to release on both iOS and Mac. Given how quickly Apple Silicon is progressing and how impressive the current range of iOS ports have proven to be, I can definitely see this segment continuing to grow so long as Apple continue to invest in it. Metallica is coming to Fortnite Festival. That's the Guitar Hero-like game mode that Epic put out a little while back. I've had a few headline acts join in the past, and so Metallica is a nice fit. More interesting though is that Epic are adding a Battle Royale mode to Fortnite Festival. It's 16 players and the lowest performing people get kicked out at the end of each song. True story, Edmond is a Guitar Hero fanatic, and when he wrote up the show notes for this one, he wrote, quote, "I'm gonna fuck everyone up," end quote. Go get him, Edmond. Avowed's release date may have leaked courtesy of Obsidian, the people making the video game. Obsidian posted a blog where they said, quote, "The last few months at Obsidian Entertainment have been fast-paced and exciting. Since what you saw at the Xbox Developer Direct this past January, we've been busy with Avowed getting it ready for its 12th November release 2024, end quote. The language there implied that that date would be old news, perhaps assuming that the most recent Avowed trailer at the Xbox Showcase would have delivered as a release date. But no, that did not happen, and so Obsidian quickly took down that blog post before re-uploading a corrected version without the date. Still, I'd certainly be marking your calendar since Obsidian kind of played their hand with that one. One first-party Microsoft game we didn't see during their showcase was Ara History Untold. It's a 4X game, which is a pretty unique offering in Microsoft's portfolio. This one was earlier revealed, but now has a release date locked in for September 24th. Bit surprised we didn't see this one at one of the bigger showcases either. Visions of Mana is getting its first new mainline entry in over 18 years. It's a red letter day for JRPG fans, or at least it will be on August 29th, which is when the game arrives for all platforms bar the Switch. Conscript is a very promising looking indie that I profiled a while back, and I'll put this on your radar segment. It's a PS1 style horror game set in the World War I trenches. It had a Steam Next Fest demo, which was excellent. This is pretty much a solo dev project, a person based in Australia of all places. Love to see it. We finally have a release date for this one. It's locked in for 23rd of July for all platforms. Speaking of Aussie indies, Exo 1 arrived for Xbox and PC back in 2021. Fantastic game. Visually, there's nothing else like it. It's finally making its way to PlayStation. It'll arrive for both PS4 and 5 on June 27th. I really recommend checking this one out, as it is great. One big announcement that kind of got buried under the Summer Games Fest chaos was that the PS2 classic The Thing is getting a remake. It comes courtesy of the one and only Night Dive Studios, who've done terrific work on other remasters like Star Wars Dark Forces, Turok, and System Shock. This is well timed since it's based on the classic John Carpenter movie, and Carpenter is just about to release an actual video game called Toxic Commando. Carpenter is actually an avid gamer, regularly firing off tweets about the games he's playing, so I'm sure he's chuffed that The Thing is coming back. No date for this one yet, but it's headed to all platforms. Speaking of remasters, the Lollipop Chainsaw Massacre remaster also got a release date this week. It'll arrive on September 25th for all platforms. Big news for Shovel Knight fans. Yacht Club Games announced that Shovel Knight Shovel of Hope DX, which is a definitive edition of their classic retro-inspired game, is on the way. This one features 20 playable characters, which is a lot more than was ever present in the base game or the DLC. Yacht Club also teased the next Shovel Knight release, which they say will launch Shovel Knight into a whole new dimension of gaming. Definitely being pretty suggestive with that little line. No date for this DX edition yet, by the way, so stay tuned. And finally, Ubisoft just released a Rabbids PvP tower defense deck builder game for iOS and Mac platforms. Enjoy Clash Royale, but wish it was about Rabbids? No, you don't. No one has ever thought that. But for some reason, Ubisoft decided to make this video game. I still don't understand why they pump so much money into their Rabbids stuff. Though to be fair, the Mario Rabbids games were absolute bangers both, so we can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. So what came out over the last 2 weeks? Well, by far and away, the biggest release was Destiny 2, The Final Shape, which arrived to universal acclaim on June 5th. We are now getting to the back end of June, and so you must be wondering, chill up, where is the Final Shape review? Well, get this is a true story. I have not even booted it up yet. It launched the same day I had to fly to LA for Summer Games Fest. I was there all week. While I was there, I got my review code for Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree, and I'm like, well, I know what I'm doing on the plane ride over because you can't play Destiny on a plane. So I started playing Elden Ring. And once I did that, I decided I would see it through. That review is done. It's up on the channel now. And so with all of that out the way, I could finally start playing Destiny 2, The Final Shape, and begin the arduous journey that is the review process. I say arduous, but I'm actually fucking pumped because by all accounts, The Final Shape is peak Destiny. And while that may sound like a low bar to many of you, it is a very high bar to me, conjuring up memories of the Taken King and Forsaken and the Witch Queen. This is supposed to be the expansion to top it all, so I'm very excited to dive in. While you wait for my review, there are plenty of other reviews to sink your teeth into. The Final Shape currently sits at a mighty 92 on OpenCritic, making it one of the highest rated releases of the entire year and the best rated Destiny expansion of all time. GameSpot wrote it up well when they scored it a 9 out of 10, saying, quote, With a character-driven story and a focus on enhancing its gameplay on nearly every level, the final shape feels like what Destiny 2 has been trying to be all along, end quote. Interesting that the expansion sits at 81% very positive on Steam, a far cry from Lightfall, which I think hit as low as like 20% when it launched last year. Tremendous result for Bungie. Going to be very interested to see where they plan to take things next. Blockbuster Incorporated is that movie studio simulator we've covered a few times now. It's currently sitting at a very disappointing mixed 47% on Steam, many of the reviews pointing to bugs, a lack of content, and a product that is generally inferior to the 2006 The Movies game that, this one was clearly inspired by. Interestingly though, critics aren't on the same page. They have this at a strong 82 on OpenCritic, though there are only like 6 reviews and none of them are from major outlets. Me personally, I put a lot of stock in Steam reviews, so maybe check back on this one after some patches have rolled through. Remedy decided to cheekily shadow drop that Alan Wake 2 DLC while we're at Summer Games Fest, and unsurprisingly, it's a treat. It's only a few hours long, 3 short and sharp chapters that each tell a unique story full of side characters from Alan Wake and even Control. Despite its short runtime, it leaves a sterling impression, with critics putting it at a strong 84 on OpenCritic. IGN scored it an 8, saying, quote, "There's admittedly not much new here from a gameplay perspective, and it feels like a bit of a tease to play as a version of Control's heroine stripped of her special abilities in the second episode. Even so, the highs I felt during my short return to Alan Wake's universe greatly outweighed the lows, and I gladly play through another collection of bite-sized stories if Remedy ever decided to bake another batch," end quote. Our man Edmond also played through them, and here's what he had to say, quote, "For those invested in Alan Wake 2's twisting narrative, and especially for those invested in the greater Remedy universe, it's an eye-opening 3 hours that greatly shatters the boundaries and dramatically expands the mind-bending possibilities of the story the studio might tell in the future. For me, it stirred up an incredible excitement for what Remedy will do with the second piece of Alan Wake DLC, Control 2, and the Max Payne remakes," end quote. Clearly, Edmund was a fan. Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance is an expanded version of the previously Switch-exclusive JRPG, now also available on PC, PlayStation, and Xbox. As you'd expect from Atlas, it's excellent. It's sitting at a mighty 88 on OpenCritic. PC Gamer raved about it, scoring it a 91 and saying, quote, "Vengeance is an easy game to like. It's an epic adventure packed full of surprises with enough bite and strategic depth for the oldest of old hands, and more than enough assistance to help newcomers feel right at home," end quote. Steam reviews for this one have it at an overwhelmingly positive 94%, by the way, so it's clearly high fives all round for this one. Another thing that dropped amidst the Summer Games madness was the Echoes update for Wayfinders. You might remember this as the Digital Extreme published free-to-play looter that had a very rocky launch. After that, DE pulled their support for the game and shuttered their entire publishing label at the same time. We actually interviewed the Airship Studio leads about this, and they revealed to us that they were relaunching the game as a premium product. No microtransactions whatsoever, co-op supported by peer-to-peer networking. It's still an early access release, but the Echoes update seems to have landed really well. On Steam, the game has never broken positive prior to this, but now the game sits at 76% mostly positive, and that number is trending up fast. It was enough to prompt Austin to dive back in since he did the initial review for the game on the channel. We're not doing a video for this one, but Austin did do a write-up over on the Patreon. That's free to everyone, not behind a paywall. TLDR, Austin really likes it, and he found himself surprisingly impressed at how well this plays with this reworked progression model and the newly added content. The game is scheduled to hit 1.0 later this year, so we'll definitely have a full video review for you then, but in the meantime, if you want to check out that write-up, I'll leave a link to it below the like button. Alrighty, so what's coming out this week? Well, I don't want to alarm anyone, but the Elden Ring DLC arrives this week. Oh my god, that is right, the single most anticipated DLC in the history of DLC is nearly here, and on the 21st, you can play it. Me personally, I've already played it and finished it, and now I'm mopping up the last of what the Shadowlands has to offer. My review is up on the channel, link below the like button. TLDR, it's incredible, I loved absolutely every second of it, and FromSoft met every expectation you might have for what makes a truly exceptional DLC. The intricacy of the dungeon design, the new boss encounters, and the surprisingly compelling narrative all stand out in ways that feel like a step up over the base offering, though I do wish that From were a little more playful and experimental with what this DLC was delivering, since a remixing of some of the format might have been interesting. That's a tough point to make here in this brief summary though, so if you want to hear more about it, then be sure to check out the full review. Like I said, link below the like button, which I'm sure you have already hit, right? Right, just checking. Elder Scrolls Online is turning 10, and to celebrate, all the previously available expansions are temporarily free to all. The bigger news though is the console launch of the Gold Road expansion, which launched for PC earlier this month. It adds a new story, new zone, new stuff to collect, etc. All the stuff you'd expect an MMO expansion to deliver that arrives for PlayStation and Xbox on the 22nd. And finally, the Riven remake arrives for PC and Mac on the 25th. This is from developer Cyan Worlds, who previously released an excellent Myst remake. Riven is of course the sequel to Myst, so this makes a lot of sense. This version of the game has been rebuilt from the ground up in Unreal Engine, and it launches day one with support for VR, which is a nice treat. Hey, put this on your radar.
I know that you're worried about the war on the continent. But you are my people, and you will come to no harm.
There's no in any trouble. We just want to talk to him.
So, the Summer Games Fest isn't just Jeff Keighley, Xbox, and Ubisoft. It's actually nearly a dozen different showcases that showed off hundreds of games, like literally hundreds of games. Impossible to keep them all in your head, but luckily, you don't have to. That's what we're for. Case in point, meet Eriksholme, The Stolen Dream, a brand new title revealed at the Future Games Showcase. It describes itself as a narrative-driven stealth game, and you can absolutely see why, since it's got these extremely impressive-looking cutscenes with some remarkable facial animations, combined with this top-down perspective for the gameplay segments. It's giving like a Plague Tale vibes, only with different perspectives and less rats, at least I think so. The focus is on avoiding confrontation by stealthing and outsmarting those who mean you harm. This just looks extremely impressive, and you don't see too many games like this outside of like Commandos, but obviously that's very different. Either way, it looks great, and if you'd like to keep tabs on it, then I recommend wishlisting it, as that always helps developers out in a big way. I've left a link to it over on my Steam Curator page, which also has links to all of the other Put This On Your Radar stuff I've recently covered. I'll leave a link to all of that below the like button. Sort of free stuff time now, and right now Epic are giving away Idle Champions of the Forgotten Realm. I think that's like the 8th time they've given that away. They're also handing out the Wipeout-like racing game Redout 2. Later this week though, that'll be replaced by Freshly Frosted, a puzzle game about making donuts. For real, it's like a donut factory where you need to like mess with the conveyor belt to get things moving. It's very cute. Xbox are riding high right now after a strong showing at Summer Games, and this month's Game Pass offering ain't no slouch neither. Right now you can get both Octopath Traveler 1 and 2, never a truer sign that Square Enix were going all in on their multi-platform strategy. The Callisto Protocol is also on there. It is not good at all, but it is very pretty, I'll give it that. In terms of day one new releases, do keep an eye out for Still Wakes the Deep, which we mentioned earlier in the show. It only runs for about 6 hours long, so it's actually quite a nice fit for Game Pass. PS Plus just got its refresh, and headline offerings include Monster Hunter Rise, and that's about it really. Everything else on there is a bit long in the tooth now. And finally, Nintendo Switch Online got an update as well, and it now includes a boatload of old Game Boy Mega Man games, literally 1 through 5. So if you want to go back and relive the glory years, knock yourself out, no clip-on lamp or backlight required. Our feel-good story for the week is one you may have heard about if you are already enlisted in the service of Super Earth. Recently, High Command issued a major order to liberate one of 2 planets. The first, named Vernon Wells, was home to thousands of innocent civilians trapped in the remains of a building called the Super Citizen Anne's Hospital for Very Sick Children. Every word in that name capitalized, by the way. The other planet's name was Marfark, and wait, what? This planet was called Marfark? Does that mean if you're from there that you're a Marfucker? That absolutely rules. I want to move to that planet. Anyway, Marfark housed crucial ingredients that would have allowed soldiers to deploy DF-17 anti-tank mines, but rather than go after the loot, brave Helldivers threw themselves at Vernon Wells, saving the virtual citizens. Luckily though, their actions had real-world implications, and as a result of this valiant sacrifice, Arrowhead Studios made an IRL donation to save the children of $4,311, $1 for every Vernon Wells civilian saved. Meanwhile, rip motherfuckers. Alrighty, that is it. We are done. Please do like the video. 1 like equals 1 prayer for a recently departed motherfucker. Subscribe, ding the bell, all that good stuff. Most importantly, be sure to stop by sometime on Sunday from 9 AM Australian Eastern Standard Time. The event page for that event is already live on the live tab of my YouTube page, so you can set a reminder for it if you like. Please do come along. Please do give generously, as it's a great cause. And who knows, maybe you'll even win yourself a prize if you do. Thanks again for watching, and a big thanks to this video's sponsor, Nvidia. Big month of announcements for this week's sponsor, Nvidia. I don't need to tell you who Nvidia are, you know them, we all know them. Market leaders in graphics technology owing to how relentless they are when it comes to rolling out new hardware, new technology, and new support for the biggest and most anticipated games. Take their recent showing at Computex. Their CEO Jensen Huang spoke about some of the new stuff they're rolling out, like more support for small form factor PCs. This is a quickly growing segment because many people want a PC to plug into their TV for gaming, but they don't want to have a giant tower sitting in their lounge room. And Nvidia is working with GPU manufacturers to streamline the sizing guidelines for GPUs so that PC builders can build small form factor setups more easily and with more confidence. They also announced an expansion of the RTX Remix beta, giving modders more tools to transform games by adding RTX-enabled effects like ray trace lighting. Personally, I am unreasonably excited about the update coming to Nvidia GeForce Experience. This will unify the client with the control panel, making it easier to customize your games and hardware for maximum performance, but it'll also provide support for the incredibly efficient AV1 codec, which is what I absolutely plan to use to record all my footage in the future. By the way, did you know that Nvidia are giving away 3 months of PC Game Pass for free? It's for new subscribers only, but if you've never tried it, then Nvidia are giving you a very good excuse to jump in. I'll leave a link to that promo below the like button. The thing I'm always most excited about though are new announcements for DLSS support in upcoming games, since DLSS does a huge amount to improve game performance. Recently, Nvidia has confirmed DLSS support for the Alan Wake 2 Night Springs DLC, delivering full ray tracing and DLSS 3.5 with ray reconstruction. Alan Wake 2 looks great no matter how you play it, but it looks truly unbelievable with all of this RTX-enabled technology supporting it. If you haven't checked it out, I really recommend doing so. Black Myth Wukong just became the most wish-listed game on Steam, and it too will support Nvidia DLSS 3.5 with ray reconstruction. Again, if you want Black Myth Wukong to look its absolute best, then you're going to want to play it on an Nvidia GPU. The First Descendant is like the 3rd most wish-listed game on Steam, and wouldn't you know it, it's launching with Nvidia DLSS 3, enabling incredible frame rates that go well beyond what non-DLSS 3 enabled hardware could manage. Finally, Dragon's Dogma also just got DLSS 3 support. Dragon's Dogma was an acquired taste, but I loved it, and now it'll run better than ever before thanks to Nvidia's tech. You get the idea. Nvidia are constantly partnering with the biggest game makers and the biggest games with the sole intention of delivering you the best possible gameplay experience. The highest settings, the smoothest frame rates, the most responsive gameplay, and the most realistic lighting. It's been Nvidia's MO from day dot, and it won't be changing anytime soon. So if you'd like to jump in and get yourself an RTX 40 series GPU, I've left a link to their product page below the like button. Thanks Nvidia for sponsoring the video, and thank you for watching it.